Hello, and welcome back to Lots More from the Heart, Ep.2. My name is Andrea, and in this month's podcast, I'd like to begin sharing my story. My story of how my life journey of loss, healing, and faith has led me to this mission of coming alongside others who are walking their own path through grief and pain toward healing and new life. With each episode, working through it, I am learning more and more about my own journey, which is the wonderful part about this endeavor, this invitation, this working with others. My hope is that by sharing pieces of my life, others like you will be inspired to share pieces of theirs, of your life. I've discovered and am thoroughly convinced that healing begins when we open our hearts and tell our stories. What has helped others in their brave sharing actually has helped me help others. And in that sharing, I found healing, actually a healing balm for the soul. So let's get started. We're going to start with early life. I was raised in the inner city of Cleveland, Ohio, the youngest of five, shaped by growing up during the turbulent 60s and 70s, a time that we now call history. My dad, uncharacteristically for the time, ran his own business, and my mom was very active in civic organizations. She even had a day named in her honor. That was really a great day. It was called Alberta B. Davis Day. A little about me. I played violin. First violin, second chair, actually. And I wrote poetry. Poetry, that's what saved my life. You'll hear more about that later. I developed at a young age a love for music. And in those early years, along with my deep love for people and making others happy, formed me. The major life event that truly changed me happened when I was about 9 or 10 years old. My sister, 5 years older, met a boy in high school who told her about Jesus and how he had changed his life. Soon after, my sister gave her life to Christ, and oh my gosh, I saw a change in her, and I wanted that change. So, as a little girl, I realized I couldn't earn my way to heaven, and I really, really wanted to go. So I saw that total change in my sister, and I asked her, "What do I need to get what you have?" And she told me, and I believed her. So I believed that Jesus was born for real, lived the life scripture says he did, that he died as the perfect sacrifice on that cross, and most importantly, rose again 3 days later. He modeled that Romans 12 kind of love that I seek after so much. Well, of course, he modeled it because he authored it. This definite change in my life didn't mean I was instantly filled with bliss and harmony. In fact, I didn't fit in. I was often noted or spoken of as, talked about, called fat, black, four eyes, and ugly. But God has a way of editing sad stories into stories of joy, fulfillment, and purpose. Well, one ordinary afternoon, that purpose began to unfold. A boy from my high school chemistry class happened to walk down my street, saw my last name on a sign, and knocked on my door. That knock would open the door to a love that has lasted through 5 years of courting and 46 years of marriage. Not that it was bliss the whole time. There were ups, downs, ins, out. I call that glue. But it ended, or it produced this time to be with the love of my life, father of my sons, my soulmate, and still best friend. This is just a short summary of my story, the early chapters, the ones that shaped me, the joys, pains, milestones, and miracles that God used to mold me into someone He could use for His purpose. I want to talk about my first losses. The very first loss I remember wasn't death, it was change. One by one, my family began to scatter, and the home that had once been full of laughter and noise grew quiet. My oldest brother got married. My oldest sister graduated and moved to D.C. Another brother joined the service and moved far away to Alaska. Alaska, of all places. And the sister who had led me to Christ, my closest companion, left for college. Suddenly, I was the only one left at home. What I didn't realize then was that grief doesn't always come dressed in black or marked by a funeral. Sometimes it shows up in those empty rooms, long silences, and the ache of missing the familiar. I was still young, but loneliness settled in early. Yet even then, God was planting seeds, teaching me empathy, tenderness, and how to listen for his voice in the quiet. Jesus said in John 10:10, I have come that they may have life and have it more abundantly. I couldn't see it then, but God was preparing me for a life richer than what I had lost. A life filled with purpose, compassion, and his abundant grace. Sort of like Joseph. Yeah, Joseph. I have found, or maybe I should say, I've accepted that I'm not a big reader. I don't consume books for hours or desire to go and hang out in the library. What I am is a listener. I learn best through the ear gate, and listening has shaped my life. It's how I help others by listening to their stories. And through hearing the many, many stories others have shared with me, I've come to realize that their stories were so powerful that they helped mine, which is still being written. I'm going to take a little turn here. Um, actually, I'm going to take a page, pardon the pun, from some good books and start with the present. I gave you a little look into where I was, my early childhood, a little tease, you might say, but I want to start with the present. I'm an older girl now, one who knows what a blog is, who's putting out, me, believe it or not, who's putting out podcasts and who loves technology, doing what most people my age don't even want to attempt. I talked to a friend today and she said, I don't even want to open a computer. What's the internet? I thought that was a little bit far there. But I'm I did it. And so I want those my generation to know that if I can do it, you can do it too. So I'm representing you. I spent much of my life working in sports. I worked as a coach of my own wonderful sons and of many others' sons and daughters. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was actually even the head coach of a high school 11-man football team that actually won games. Actually, too, I was featured in the Fresno Bee, and that sort of catapulted my years, which I spent many, as an athletic director, trainer, and coach. I learned to listen to my athletes. That first shaped my working with people. I learned to listen to my athletes' lives, dreams, and hurts. That experience changed my life's direction. I decided to pursue my master's degree with an undergraduate in organizational management and a background in athletics. I thought it might be in sports where I would go. But my pastor's wife once said, my pastor at the time, his wife once said, "You'd make a great counselor." That simple statement ignited something in me. So if you listen to this podcast, thank you for igniting something in me. So I began my studies by the grace of God at Liberty University, seeking a master's in professional clinical counseling. I chose Liberty because I wanted to counsel from a Christian worldview without judgment towards those who don't share it. In other words, you don't have to have a Christian world and life view. You don't have to be a Christian, but I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to care about you and I'm going to love you. Um, my husband, what was a military member for over 20 years, and during my internship, I revisited something feel familiar, very familiar from our military life. Wherever he was stationed, I worked with the teen center on the base. And here, going through my internship, I wound up going back to the base, as I said earlier, and I wound up running the teen center again on this base. It was a safe space for teens struggling with change and identity. It was there I met a young man so broken. He confided he wanted to end his life. He wanted to take his father's life and then end his life. Of course, I followed all required steps for his safety, but beyond that, I got to share the reason for the hope that he saw and to use with him. I told him my story. I told him my story of the God who reached for me when I didn't want to live anymore. He listened, and by God's grace, he chose life. He went on, actually, I learned later from other teens, to become a husband, father, and a wonderful guy. That moment always reminds me why I do this. To be a vessel, to be a vessel God can use to reach hurting hearts. In my later, after starting into, it's not a residency, but starting into my internships again, um, I wound up working in two fields. After finishing school, I stayed with those two fields. So after walking the graduation line, by the way, the reason I wanted to graduate and walk the line, because I wanted to wear that hood thing. I thought it was really neat. And it's like, I want to wear that. So I did. But I moved into full-time work helping others heal. One of my internships led me to hospice work. That was big because for most of my life, I feared death. I didn't even want to say the D word. I secretly hoped I'd just get raptured out of here. But God, well, we know, He works in mysterious ways. I began in hospice as a social worker, but later transitioned into bereavement counseling and volunteer coordination. It is here that God began to transform my fear into compassion, my hesitation into purpose. Working in hospice changed me, needless to say. I began running grief support groups and found my God given purpose there as well. I went back for certification after certification in grief counseling and care. I realized my private practice work wasn't truly fulfilling unless it involved grief support. There is such a need for grief counselors, especially in rural areas. The life lessons, and yes, the death lessons I've learned have shaped me more than any book, lecture, or degree ever could. These stories, these people, their courage, they all became part of the heartbeat of this ministry. Lots more from the heart. So, back to the beginning. Yes, I was lonely, but never alone. God, in His Joseph way, was allowing every twist and turn to shape me, prepare me, and bring me to today. Looking back, I can say with gratefulness, He was there all along, working, shaping, healing. As I share these pieces of my story, I invite you to reflect on yours. What moments has God used to shape you? Where did loss lead you to life? Psalm 66:16 says, "Come and hear, all you who fear God, and I will declare what He has done for my soul." That's what this podcast, this ministry is about as well, declaring what He has done for our souls. With each of us, we have a story. We have a story of loss and we have a story of life, a story of sorrow and a story of joy. And through sharing, we can find hope together. Thank you for listening to this episode of Lots More from the Heart. May you find healing and hope as you share your own story. Blessings.